The year is 1905. French doctor Gabriel Boriot, or however the you're meant to pronounce that, observed some poor soul having his head cut off. Said poor soul was Henry Langrile, who was being executed for murdering several people. So actually, he was less of a poor soul and more of a bellend. In fact, he was a French bellend, which kind of makes him even worse. Anyway, so the story goes, following his neck meeting the blade of a guillotine, which I wouldn't recommend, Dr. Gabriel documented signs of life emanating from the criminal's decapitated head. His eyes said to open and focus on the doctor as he started shouting his name, and thank God they did. Otherwise, this guy would have looked like a right idiot screaming at a dead man. The experience allegedly lasted for between 25 and 30 seconds, and since then there have been plenty of documented cases of humans briefly surviving without the use of a head. The longest in reported history as of the making of this video being 26 years and 14 days, a record owned by Aston Martin Formula 1 driver Lance Stroll. People have attempted to defend this guy in the past. Well, some people, definitely not me, but don't expect this video to have a happily ever after ending. What we all saw in the formation lap in Brazil was clear proof, if there wasn't enough already, that this guy is taking up the spot of a driver far more capable and deserving of being in Formula 1. Just look at who we're losing going into next year. Valtteri Bottas, gone. Kevin Magnussen, gone. Ricciardo, gone. Slow, gone. Sargent. Actually, let's not get too carried away. Formula 1 is seeing a generational shift right now, where emerging young talent from the likes of Argentina and the Conservative Party are showing the benefits of taking a gamble on the stars of tomorrow. And teams are listening, proven by the most recent decision by Super Mario to sign Gabriel Bortoleto to Sauber for 2025. But not all teams. Enter Aston Martin. These guys were once the bootstrappers of the grids, born out of the ashes of Jordan and Spiker's piss-poor attempt to create a Formula 1 team. The Force India outfit were regular points and later podium scorers, despite the car being funded by whatever Vijay Mallya could find between his loan documents. All that very nearly came to an end midway through 2018, when Force India were put into administration at the end of July, and the future of the team looked to be in jeopardy. But then came Lawrence Stroll, a Canadian businessman who sort of looks like an ever-disappointed Father Christmas, if you squint your eyes and imagine the fun-loving toy maker with the personality of a grapefruit. Stroll saved the team, turning Force India into Racing Point, then into Aston Martin when he realised the first name was shit. The Aston moniker marked the beginning of a new era for the outfit, one where they would actually have money and could develop a car and sign top drivers, or one top driver and the new boss's son. Lance Stroll's appointment for the start of the 2019 season was already swimming in controversy long before it was actually announced, partly because he hadn't been particularly impressive in his first 2 years as a Williams driver, and partly because he would be curb-stomping Frenchman Esteban Ocon out of the sport. Aston, meanwhile, would move past this and unveil big plans, a new factory and wind tunnel facilities, snatching up big names like Adrian Newey pageboy Dan Fallows from Red Bull. Everyone now wondered what the team who did a lot with a little could actually do with a hell of a lot more. 2023 would give us an answer, as new signing and decomposing corpse Fernando Alonso would guide Aston to 6 podiums in the first 8 races, marking out the team as one who could potentially take the fight to the dominant Red Bull Max Verstappen duo, except for 2 reasons. For starters, their bolstered technical team must have got so drunk off their early success they were still plastered when trying to design new upgrades to keep Aston competitive over the course of the whole year. Only 2 more podiums followed for Fernando, and one of those was more down to his skill as a driver than whatever the Aston had given him to work with that weekend. The other issue lied on the other side of the garage, as while Fernando was lapping up the silverware, Lance Stroll was sometimes lucky to even be in the points. In fact, it was far more likely for the Canadian to be in the barrier. I made a video on this at the time, at one point claiming that these results, matched with Aston's general downturn in form over the season, could result in the Canadians single-handedly taking the team, with at times the second fastest car on the grid, to as low as 5th in the standings, and rarely for one of my takes, that's exactly what ended up happening. It just highlights the big identity crisis affecting the Silverstone-based outfit at the moment. This is a team planning for tomorrow, making the big signings, snatching Adrian Newey from Red Bull, going on this big song and dance over how they're gunning to be competitive in the new 2026 regulations. And yet they keep this guy around, like he's the luckiest Make-A-Wish kid the world has ever seen. In a word, Lance Stroll's overall career has been underwhelming. A word that would net you at least 23 points in the game of Scrabble, which is just 1 less than the Canadians amassed over the entirety of 2024. He's been trounced by Alonso again, as he was with Felipe Massa at Williams and Sergio Perez at Racing Point. In fact, the only teammates he's managed to beat is this Russian bloke everyone's forgotten the name of and Sebastian Vettel in his woke phase. Seb's Aston Martin results may not have been up to scratch compared with what he was able to do earlier in his career, but at least he managed to connect with the people by this stage. Stroll, meanwhile, has been better known to be an entitled wanker over the team radio than preparing for a future career in the UFC when he's out of the car. And then we get to Brazil 2024. Q2, Stroll bins it in qualifying, the torrential weather picking at the low-hanging fruit as it ticked drivers off its hit list. And you know what? I'll actually excuse this. The conditions were difficult, catching out far more experienced and accredited drivers that morning. Plus, it gave us an exciting championship fight right before Norris cocked it all up. What's far less excusable is what happened later that day. Aston put in the blood, sweat and tears to repair both cars in record time, and Stroll lost one more corner than he did in quali before binning it in the barriers yet again. That's okay, it's just the formation lap. We'll just shelve the fact that he's managed to do this on the fucking formation lap and watch him recover. He's stranded on tarmac so he can flick spin his Aston and regain those positions, or just drive around the runoff and get back onto the circuit. Or just drive straight through the gravel and get beached, you useless sack of This incident taught us two things. Firstly, that Lance Stroll's head has just replaced osmium as the new densest material on the fucking planet. And secondly, that surely now it's time for Lawrence Stroll to decide if he really does want a world championship winning team, or if he wants to continue fielding his son in one of their cars, because those two are mutually exclusive at this point. We've already seen what Lance can do with a good car, and it makes Checo Perez look remotely like he still deserves a spot in today's field. Now he's got a bad one, and the results are just getting more and more embarrassing. What's perhaps worse is that Lance still won't take responsibility for his actions. Don't get me wrong, he'd be getting stick for this anyway, but far less if this wasn't his response in the media pen afterwards.
As soon as I touched the brakes, we just had a huge rear lock, and then I was a passenger from there, so I've never felt that in the car, so maybe there was a brake failure problem. It was a brake failure.
Now, I fully appreciate that Lance is referring to the spin that put him in the wall in the first place here, but was it really a brake failure, or is this just a cover for potentially one of the most embarrassing retirements in recent F1 memory? Unsurprisingly, Aston would come out defending their prodigal son, claiming they had in fact discovered problems impacting their car. This coming from a team who, let's remember, coming into the Brazilian Grand Prix, claimed they had such a good understanding of their machinery, they were going back to Suzuka spec as they thought it might be faster. Now let me be clear here, I have absolutely zero evidence to back these claims up. I've just lost all faith in both the teams and Lance's abilities to be even somewhat competent anymore. Like, let's be honest, the team are obviously going to toe their driver's party line. It's not like Mike Crack is going to pop out of his stasis pod and address the world's media and say, oh, well, actually, Lance is just a bit fucking stupid. By brake failure, he was actually trying to say brain failure because it's the only possible explanation for crashing twice on the fucking formation lap. Or maybe you would say that if he felt flights to Switzerland were just a tad too expensive. Back to the facts though, and at the end of the day, Lance Stroll is Lawrence's son, and Lawrence gets to make the big decisions. But surely there comes a point where a conversation needs to be had over the future of this team. They have Adrian Newey coming in, Enrico Cardile joining from Ferrari, the mastermind behind Mercedes engine dominance Andy Cowell on board. That start to 2023 gave us just a taste of what this team can do when it's firing on all cylinders. Well, that exact same start to 2023 should be telling Lawrence it's time to finally move on. Anyway, those are my latest thoughts. Now over to you in the comments. I'd usually ask for your opinions on if Stroll should stay, but since the answer is so bloody obvious, let's just play a game and guess the date for the announcement of his departure. Then we can come back to this video in about 50 years time and work out who got it right. While you're at it, a like and sub to the channel will be much appreciated, and if you enjoyed this one, then my patrons and channel members got access to it early. If that sounds like something you're interested in, then why not check out the links in the description down below. Now I'll be back very soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.